welcome to qiphyedu. Today we'll be looking at economics O-level, paper 12, October, November 2022. Alright, let's start. Okay, so for the first question is this. The Chinese government is concerned about the level of poverty and the need for more resources in low-income regions of the country. As a result, it is increasing expenditure on those regions and reducing it in high-income regions. And which economic concept does this government policy illustrate? Okay, so the government is now increasing expenditure in places with high poverty rates or expenditure in places with let's say population of a lower income. Now, the thing is with if you were to, when it comes to revenue, this means that you will receive lower revenue in the form of tax if you were to invest in let's say low income regions. Like maybe for example in high income regions, it's mostly going to be like city centers, the city center, capital city, like let's say for example in China it will be Beijing, and then let's say larger cities like Shenzhen or Shanghai, and then you're like paying, let's say you're spending money in low income regions, let's say for example like a very rural area, let's say in probably somewhere in the far east, I guess, of China, let's say. And then in this case, right, the opportunity cost would be to, not opportunity cost, but like the fact that you are spending it in the low income region means that the thing that you could have done better would be to spend it in the high income region. So this would constitute into opportunity cost. For instance, C, which is opportunity cost. If you look at all the other options, specialization is definitely not the thing here. If it's specialization, that means that you were to separate like workers into different processes, like maybe process 1, process 2, and process 4. Process 1 would be to, let's say, build something. Let's say like build something. Process 2 would be to check the item for any damages. Process 3 would be to pack the item. Process 4 would be to export the item out to somewhere. And then you keep on repeating doing the same thing every day. That would be specialization, but it's not listed here. And then market forces is not correct because it's the government spending spending money and not consumers spending money on a particular good with firms involved. And then it's not these economies of scale as well. So the best answer would be C, which is opportunity cost. Your opportunity cost would then be money that could have been spent elsewhere. Like in this case would be in the high income regions. Question 2, an airline needs people and equipment. These can be divided into factors of production and what is allocated to its correct factor of production. So you look at the 4 options here, you can see that for aircraft, the factor of production is capital, because indeed aircraft is a capital good. You need to have an aircraft in order to send people to different locations. Indeed, it is part of capital. Airline owners would not be considered as labor. Labor would be the pilot, not the airline owner. Airline owners, they will not be classified as labor because first of all, the airline owners they don't earn wages in general. They don't really produce anything. They just own that particular item. So it's incorrect to label it as labor. And then computer network should be part of capital because you need the computer network to, let's say, monitor the flight. For example, let's say I want to know where this airplane is at right now. Is it somewhere above the Indian Ocean, above the South China Sea, or in which country, for example? So I will need to have this particular capital equipment. And so a computer is not land. You cannot earn any profits from not profits, but then you cannot earn rent using computer networks. So it's not part of land. And then pilots are not based on factor enterprise. It's based on factor labor because pilots are the ones that are doing the work, which is to use the aircraft and then to send people to other countries or to other locations. So the best answer will be aircraft and capital. So answer is A. Question 3, the diagram shows a PPC and a number of output combinations for tea and coffee. And which combinations of tea and coffee could the economy currently produce? So you can see that for all the points on this PPC, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, you see that for W and Z, they are both outside of the PPC, indicating that these 2 points are currently unreachable because you need to have let's say discover different types of raw materials, and you need to have advanced basic technology. Only then your PPC will then shift outwards. And then you can see that for U and V, these are possible. But then if you were to produce at U or V, there will be inefficiency because probably there's unemployment and you're not using your raw materials to its full potential. So UV is possible, but under the condition that there may be unemployment and the fact that you are not efficiently using resources. X and Y are points on the PPC, indicating that both of these points, it basically indicates that the economy is operating at full capacity with little to no unemployment, and raw materials are used efficiently. So the combination of tea and coffee that could be produced would be UV, X, and Y. So A says UV, W, and X, which is not correct because W is not possible at the moment. UV and XY will be correct, so answer is B. But let's look at C and D first and see why it's incorrect. UV, X, and Z. UV, X is possible, but Z is impossible because it is outside the PPC. And then V, X, Y, Z. V, X, Y are possible, but Z is not possible because it is outside the PPC. I'll say it's B. Question 4, what is the disadvantage of a market economy? Okay, a market economy is basically when the prices of goods are determined based on the market forces and price mechanism, which means that depending on the consumer, if the consumer decides to buy this item, then let's say, then that will be indicated by the demand curve, and then the amount that the producers can supply will be based on the supply curve. So the price would then be determined based on the amount of demand available and also based on the supply. And then this would then indicate the price, equilibrium price for that particular item. So to say that consumer choice is ignored is not correct because consumers do have a choice to choose between, let's say, good A, good B, good C, or whatnot. Let's say, for example, tea and coffee, they can choose to consume tea instead of coffee. And then as a result, the demand for coffee would decrease. So it does indeed exist. So A is not correct. B says consumers may lack information. Consumers may lack information is correct because first of all, in the market economy, there is a missing market. Let's say, for example, if you were to, for example, goods that are required to be allocated by the government. Let's say public roads, for example, public roads, public lighting, parks, for example, all these are under public goods. And then let's say healthcare and hospitals, because for healthcare and hospitals, these fall under ordinary goods. First of all, a lot of people, they have imperfect information about the benefits of education, and also some people do not know that healthcare exists. So in order to increase the amount of healthcare and education available, they have to expand its availability to locations outside of the city center. Let's say in villages, for example, we need to have more clinics. So the problem with market economy is that these goods are not going to be allocated because simply producers, they do not want to make something that doesn't generate any kind of profit. And for example, for merit goods and public goods, for example, there's no way that they can actually make a profit out of, let's say, public goods, for example. Let's say they provide street lighting. Street lighting, for example, there's no way that you can charge every single person for using street lighting. Roads, you probably can charge it using toll fares or something, but then you still need to have routes where people can drive for free. So in this case, consumers will lack information. They will have information failure. So yep, B is clear. C, government subsidies encourage efficiency, which is an advantage of which is not a disadvantage of market economy. Rather, it's an advantage of a mixed economy. So this is not a disadvantage of market economy because first of all, you're not talking about market economy, you're talking about a mixed economy in general. Because only a mixed economy would have government, not to say only, but like if it's a mixed economy or if it's a centrally planned economy, then both of these would have either partial government intervention or full government intervention. So if you're talking about mixed economy, there will be partial government intervention by the form based on, like, let's say, for example, subsidies, taxes, direct provision of goods and services, aka transfer payments, or just direct provision of goods in general. So in this case, right, this is an advantage of a mixed economy, but rather it's also not a disadvantage of a market economy. So C is not correct. D says there's no incentive to work, which is incorrect because first of all, in a market economy, there's competition. When there's competition, people would then work harder to actually earn more money, and so if let's say it's a mixed economy, that means that some goods will be provided by public sector and also private sector. Assuming that some of the goods are provided by the public sector and then the government then intervenes in, let's say, the private sector when it comes to maximum price, minimum prices, and all these, then yes, there may be no incentive to work, because let's say, for example, the government decides to increase income taxes, for example, then yes, people would then feel like, what's the point of working when you take so much of my money away? So yep, if it's in the mixed economy or a centrally planned economy, this may happen. So to say that it's a disadvantage of a market economy is incorrect. It should be a disadvantage of a centrally planned economy, or it also could be a disadvantage of a mixed economy, given that there is government intervention. So D is not correct, so answer is B. Question 5, workers are awarded a pay rise but do not increase their productivity, and workers do not buy the product that they produce. So how will this change be shown on the demand and supply diagram for the product? Okay, so the price, and the demand and supply. Okay, demand is downward sloping, supply is upward sloping. Okay, so workers are awarded a pay rise, but then they do not increase their productivity, meaning that then that means that the COP will increase. If your COP increases, your supply curve then will have to shift to the left. So assuming that that's the case, it will look something like this. Workers don't buy the product that they produce, which means that the demand curve would remain the same, and then when they do not increase their productivity, the supply decreases. So in this case, the supply curve will shift to the left. That will be the most definite answer, so answer is C. Question 6, the diagram shows changes in the market conditions, and which diagram shows a shortage at price P. If you look at A, at D1 and S, this is equilibrium. There is an equilibrium price, and then equilibrium supply and equilibrium demand. However, if you were to shift to D2, at the same price, there's actually a shortage, because there is a decrease in supply and an increase in demand, but then at the same time, there's no way that the quantity supply could actually fulfill the quantity demanded, so that means that there will be a shortage. This can be indicated by the difference between D1 and D2. If you look at B, there's only one demand curve and two supply curves. When the supply curve shifts to right, you'll realize that there is a surplus, because now when the supply curve shifts to right, this means that you're producing more. When you're producing more, and then you are actually producing it at the same price, this indicates that there will be a decrease in demand, simply because, first of all, less people will be able to purchase the product, and second, when your supply increases, this means that you're technically being able to sell the item at a lower price. So because of the fact that the price is now fixed at P, this will result in the surplus. So you can see the difference between S and D right here. S and D, that would be something like this. So you can see that there is a surplus because your supply is more than demand. C, you can see that regardless of how much your supply curve has changed when it comes to elasticity, it is still an equilibrium pricing, equilibrium quantity, equilibrium demand, so there's no difference in C. D, you see that, let's say D1, S1, the price and the quantity are at Q1, price is at P and the quantity is at Q1, and then when you shift it to S2 and D2, quantity is at Q2 and price still remains at P, indicating that there is no shortage, so D is also not correct, so answer is A. Question 7, what is the definition of price elasticity of demand? So price elasticity of demand is basically the percentage change of quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. So let's look at which one is the closest definition. A says the responsiveness of quantity demand of product to a change in income. This one would be under income elasticity of demand, so it's not correct. B says the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a product to a change in the price of a complementary product. This one is under cross elasticity of demand, so B is not correct. C says the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a product to a change in the price of that product, which is correct. D says the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a product to a change in the price of a substitute product. Again, this falls under cross elasticity of demand, and it has to be a positive value, and then for complementary product, that will be a negative value. So B and D fall under cross elasticity of demand. A falls under income elasticity of demand. C falls under price elasticity of demand. So answer is C. Question 8. To reduce traffic congestion, a government decides to build a new road. There is a toll charge on the new road, and what is the main purpose of this government intervention? So a new road, and then there is a toll charge, indicating that it is a basically, when it comes to its definition, it should be a quasi-public good or semi-public good. So it looks like a public good, but at the same time you need to pay for a toll. So so you can see that in this case, right, most roads, for example, they are actually built by the government. Let's say Malaysia, for example, most of the roads in Malaysia, federal roads in general, are maintained by the JKR, Jabatan Kerja Rakyat, Public Works Department. And then some roads like highways, they are under, let's say, PLUS, for example. There will be Project Lebar Rakyat Utara Selatan, or basically North-South Expressway in general. And then so there are some roads that are actually toll roads, mostly highways. And then before this, the federal highway, there was a toll charge. But the federal highway is also maintained by the JKR. So that, if before that, that will be considered as a quasi-public good or semi-public good. So if you look at A, B, C, D, we'll see which one will be the correct answer. So you can see that if it's because the fact that it's actually the government that is building a new road, this means that there is a missing market. So A, it says to address the problem of market failure, which is correct. All right. B, it says to discourage people from using public transport. This is not exactly correct. First of all, there is a toll charge. A toll charge meaning that you need to pay to use the road. So if let's say the toll charge is actually higher than taking public transport, people will still instead take public transport instead of buying a car. So it's not to discourage people from using public transport, instead it's to reduce traffic congestion, right? And then C, it says to ensure the supply of transport through the free market, which is not correct because we're not talking about supply of transport, but rather supply of goods. We need to increase the supply of goods, so C is not correct. D, it says to obtain revenue from the levy of a toll, which is not correct. Basically, if the government decides to build a new road, they're actually going to spend more, building it, maintaining it in general, and then the toll charge that they'll get in return would actually be, it will not really be a revenue at best. But then it could be a purpose as well, but not exactly the main reason. The main reason will be to address market failure, because most private concessionaires, they would choose not to build a road because they are not sure of making a profit, if let's say there's no traffic congestion to begin with. So answer is A. Question 9, which organizations can directly fund the growth of firms? The central bank funds the government. So firms, they are unable to actually borrow from the central bank. They can only borrow from the commercial banks and then receive subsidies from the government. So central banks, we know, so CD is wrong. Commercial banks, yes, you can get money from commercial banks by issuing for a loan. And then government, you can get money by, let's say, for example, let's say the government decides to give you an incentive, then yes, organizations that can directly fund and grow firms will be commercial banks and also the government. So answer is B. And then question 10, which advantage do coins have that make them more suitable than paper banknotes to act as money? Coins are made out of, basically, coins are made out of a harder material than paper. Paper is something that's one piece of paper, right? So if, let's say when it comes to durability, paper banknotes will then lose compared to coins. So A, it says they are more divisible, which is not exactly the advantage. And B, it says they are more durable, which is correct. C, it says they are more portable. To say that they're more portable is actually a bit of a mixed bag, because coins are much heavier than paper banknotes. So when it comes to portability, paper banknotes are actually much better. So that's not really the correct answer. And D says they are more recognizable, which is incorrect. You can actually, because paper banknotes are much larger in general, so the more recognizable ones would be paper banknotes, to be really honest. So answer is B. Question 11, which statement about different income groups is correct? A, it says high income groups do not need to borrow money, which is not correct, because high income groups also borrow money. This depends on what amount that they're borrowing. Let's say, for example, they want to buy a new car, so they will borrow like a larger amount. Let's say to buy, let's say, the newest luxury car, for example. So high income groups do borrow money, but probably they will borrow more compared to lower income groups. B, it says high income groups save less money than low income groups, which it's not really correct, because most higher income groups would actually save more money than low income groups, which is because there's a higher chance that high income groups will save more money than low income groups just by the income alone. So B is not really correct. And C says low income groups find it easier to borrow than high income groups, which is incorrect, because first of all, banks would be more comfortable lending money to people with higher incomes because they know that they'll be able to return on time. But people with lower income, it's actually more prone for them to actually pay late, for example. So let's say, for example, you have a loan, let's say like $10,000, for example, and then you need to, the repayment will probably be like $200 per month. Let's say the low income group, let's say they only have like an income of, let's say, $1,000, for example, and then they use up almost all the money, and then they won't be able to return the money to the bank. So then it's actually much harder because, first of all, the bank is not confident with the people from low income groups to lend money in the first place. So people that have high incomes would be would actually be able to borrow money easier than low income groups in general. And these low income groups have saved a small percentage of their income than high income groups, which is factually correct because, first of all, low income groups, they will spend more money on spend a higher percentage of money on food, and then high income groups will spend a lower percentage of money on food because probably they're eating the same thing, but then low income groups have to spend more. And then indeed, by the end of the day, the money that they can save will probably be a smaller percentage than high income groups. So this is the most accurate answer. Answer is D. Question 12, a musician has a choice of playing for an orchestra in either Germany or England, and which combination of incomes and cost of living is most likely to cause her to choose the German orchestra? Okay, so let's look at the 4 options and see which one makes sense. Now, incomes and cost of living in Germany compared with those in England. Of course, when it comes to cost of living, people would choose the lower one, so A and C would not be correct because the cost of living is higher. And then look at B and D. Pre-tax income higher and lower for B or D, and then after tax would be lower and higher. For most people, most people would actually be better off with a higher income after tax rather than a lower income before tax. So the combination of incomes will be lower pre-tax income and then higher after-tax income. So after the taxes, you get a higher income in general. That means that you have more money to spend. So naturally, people will choose to go to Germany because, first of all, lower pre-tax and higher after-tax income, and then lower cost of living. So answer is D. If let's say the after-tax income is lower, this means that they'll have less money to spend, which is not favorable. So answer has to be D. That will be the most accurate one. Question 13, the central bank of a country decreases interest rates to help the economy out of a recession. And how is this decrease in interest rates most likely to affect the levels of saving in and borrowing from the country's commercial banks? So of course, if let's say the interest rate decreases, this means the level of saving will also decrease because people will now tend to spend rather than save. So C and D is not correct. And then the amount of borrowing will increase because of the decrease in interest rates, meaning that the repayment will be lower. So yeah, borrowing will increase. First saving decreases, then borrowing increases. So answer is B. Question 14, which effect of increased specialization by firms and workers is most likely to cause problems for an economy? Okay, specialization in general, there are many advantages, and let's look one by one through the 4 options here. A, it says better product quality, which is correct because, first of all, higher efficiency, and then the fact that the worker themselves are already very used to building this certain product for like probably months. They will be able to produce high quality items because they already know what they're doing. B, it says greater interdependence, which is not an advantage, rather a disadvantage, right? Interdependence. So you're depending on things in general, and it's greater, so it's going to be causing a problem for the economy. So B is not correct. C says high productivity, which is correct because, like I said, you are already used to items, so you can produce more. D says improved resource allocation, which is correct because same person doing the same thing, they know what the kind of resources that they need. So rather than having a surplus, they know themselves that they'll be able to produce this thing with this particular amount of goods, with this amount of resources. So answer has to be B when it comes to its problems, or I should say disadvantage of specialization. Question 15, which statement is correct when comparing small firms with large firms? Okay, so for larger firms, it's actually much difficult for them to actually adapt to market conditions. Rather, for small firms, it's actually easier. The reason for that is because small firms, they are small, so their production is also small. So assuming that they just wanted to, let's say, build something, then they could do that according to market conditions. It's difficult for larger firms because larger firms take time since it is large, so the production would be much higher in general. They'll be producing the same thing over and over again. For them, it will be much difficult to adapt to changes that are, quite swift, right? And then so if you look at the 4 options, A says small firms are more able to adapt to changing market conditions, which is correct. Let's look at the other options though. B says small firms are able to reduce competition through barriers to entry, which is not correct. This should be for larger firms. mostly larger firms will be a monopoly, mostly. So larger firms are more able to reduce competition through barriers to entry, but small firms, because of the fact that they are small scales of production, so that means that it's very difficult for them to reduce competition. In fact, there will be more competition against smaller firms. C, it says small firms benefit from lower cost per unit from economies of scale, which is not correct. That will be for larger firms. Larger firms, they produce more, so they'll be able to benefit from lower cost per unit, but not smaller firms. Smaller firms will actually have to spend more. And this says small firms have higher total fixed costs and lower average fixed costs, which is not correct. They should have both. Only larger firms will be able to have lower TFC and lower AFC. So answer has to be A. Question 16, which pay is included in the government's budget? A, it says consumption and factor income, which is not correct. This one will be under consumers. B is export and imports, which is firms. C is investment and saving, which is consumers or firms. For savings general, that will be consumers. D says public expenditure and tax revenue, which is under the government's budget. Yes, indeed, answer is D. Question 17, the table shows the real income tax paid at different income levels. At $30,000, that'll be 20%. At $40,000, that'll be 30%. And then for $50,000, that'll be 40%. So this is a progressive tax because the real income tax increases when your income increases. So, and the fact that income tax itself is a direct tax makes A not the correct answer. B says progressive, which is correct. And C says proportional, which is not correct. If it's proportional, the real income tax should be the same for every single income. And D says regressive, which is not correct. If it's regressive, the real income tax should be much higher than 20, 30, and 40 to begin with. So answer is B. 18, the central bank reduces interest rates and what will not be a consequence of this action. So if you reduce interest rates, people who receive a loan will be much better off because they will have to repay with lower interest rates. So A is the correct consequence. B says a fall in the international value of the currency, which is correct because the AD curve shifts to right, resulting in an increase in price level. C says a reduction in inflation, which is incorrect because the AD curve shifts to right, increasing the price level. At the same time, this would also result CPI to increase. So that'll be the correct answer. And D says an increase in GDP, which is a consequence because AD curve shifts to right, so the GDP will increase. So answer is C. Question 19, the diagram shows a country's economic growth rate over a 5-year period. You can see that for year 1, there will be 5%, positive 5%. Year 2 will be positive 3%. Year 3 will be positive 1%. Year 4 will be negative 1%. And then year 5 is positive 2%. What can be concluded from the diagram? So you can see that for year 1 until year 3, the output will definitely increase. Output will definitely increase in 3 years. But then if the 4th year, the output will decrease slightly. But then in year 5, it increases again. So to say that output fell throughout the period is incorrect. B says output was at its highest in year 1. It's not correct. It's just that the rate is the highest, but not the output as itself, the total output. The total output is highest in year 5 because of the fact that it constantly increases and then decreases in year 4, and then in year 5 it increases again the final year. And so C says output was at its highest in year 5, which is correct. D says output was at its lowest in year 4. This is incorrect because you can see that from year 1 to year 3, there's already an increase of 5%, 3%, 1%, and then there's a slight decrease by negative 1%. So to say that output was at its lowest in year 4 is incorrect. Output was at its lowest in year 1, because year 1 there's only an increase of 5%, but over the years, the economic growth increases continuously until year 3, until year 4 when it decreases. So output is not in the lowest in year 4, instead it's at year 1. So answer is C. Question 20, an individual decides to employ a professional decorator rather than buying the materials and decorating her house herself, and why would this decision cause GDP to rise? If you employ a professional decorator, this means that your demand or aggregate demand in general would increase because of increasing consumer expenditure. So A says the activity will be recorded as income for the decorator, which is correct. B says the individual will have more leisure time, which is not correct. Yes, the individual will have more leisure time, but that doesn't result in an increase in GDP. It says personal well-being. C says the professional decorator can purchase materials at a discount, which is incorrect. D says the professional decorator will work less efficiently than the individual. If you work less efficiently, then there's no reason to actually employ a professional decorator. to begin with. So answer is A. Question 21. What is the definition of the unemployment rate? A, it says the benefits and allowances paid by the government to people without a job. That is transfer payment, so it's not correct. B, it says the number of people without a job is seeking a job as a percentage of the labor force. This is the definition of unemployment rate. C, it says the rate of change in number of people who have not worked over the last year. But if that's the case, right, number of people who have not worked would then include housewives, students, people with pensions, babies. So people who are actively looking for jobs but they cannot find a job, that will be people who are unemployed. So to say that the rate of change in number of people who have not worked would then include people who are not actively seeking for work as well. So C is not correct. And D says the total number of people not working, where data was calculated. Again, total number of people not working, you're also including people who are students, housewives, people who are not actively searching for jobs. So it's not correct. So I'll say B. Question 22, what is most likely to cause inflation? Inflation will basically be the sustained increase in the general price level. So A says a reduction in exports, which will result in the AD curve to shift to the left, decreasing the price level. So nope, that's not going to cause inflation. B says a reduction in government spending, again shifting the AD to the left, so not correct. C says an increase in the rate of interest, again shifting AD to the left. And D says an increase in trade union power, which indeed would result in inflation because of increase in AD to the right. And question 23, the table shows changes in economic growth and inflation, which changes are likely to be the result of rising unemployment, right? So if let's say there is rising unemployment, this is when there's a decrease in economic growth and also a decrease in inflation. So CD is not correct because of rising economic growth, and B is also not correct because of rising inflation. Now, rising unemployment is basically when you can say that there's a recession, so AD curve shifts to left, which at the same time would result in a decrease in the price level, which would result in a decrease in inflation, and the fact that there's a decrease in AD would also result in the falling economic growth. So answer is A. Question 24, the table shows the percentage changes in earnings and consumer prices for 4 countries in 1 year, and which countries are likely to have experienced the greatest increase in real income. A says France, basically, there's a positive 6.5% of increase in earnings and a positive 3.5% increase in consumer prices. Germany, you can see that it's 4.0 and consumer prices increased by 4.0, so basically no change. And then C, it says Japan, the earnings is positive 4.0, consumer prices is negative 1. So there's a decrease in consumer prices and also an increase in earnings. But this is not the ultimate one. UK will be positive 6.5 and a negative 2.0 increase in consumer prices. So there's a decrease in consumer prices and a very huge increase in earnings. So reason why A is not correct is because for France, there is a 6.5 increase earning, but then at the same time, the consumer prices also increased by 3.5. So the greatest increase would be positive earnings and negative consumer prices. So answer is UK, so answer is D. Question 25, what is included in the Human Development Index? So the Human Development Index doesn't include environmental sustainability, so D is not correct. But it does include life expectancy and years of schooling, so answer is C. These two are under Human Development Index. Question 26, the fall in the level of absolute poverty can be best achieved by reducing what? So A, it says government unemployment benefits, which is not correct because first of all, people would now be less induced to find jobs. They'll just rely on unemployment benefits, so technically they will still be under poverty. And technically this is it's basically the fact that you're directly providing unemployment benefits basically means that you're not technically, it's basically an increase in government expenditure to begin with. So help. B says income tax, again, it's also a demand side policy. And D says real inflation, again, demand side policy. If you reduce the number of homeless people, maybe like giving them a house, for example, increasing the job scope, job opportunities, then yes, it's under supply side policy. So answer is C, closest one again. 27, the table shows some details from the country's balance of payments. The country has no secondary income. And what is the country's balance on its current account? Everything is under current account. So export of goods is 280, import of goods is 350. So net, so trading goods would be a negative 70 because you import more than your exports. For import and export services, you can see that for imports that will be this would be a surplus of 50 million because you export more than you import by 50 million. And then the net primary income is negative 40, so you have to minus that out. So negative 70 plus 50, you get negative 20. Negative 20 plus negative 40, you get negative 60. So there's a deficit of 60 million. So answer is A. Question 28. Vietnamese companies buy insurance from companies in the US, and how will this transaction be recorded in the Vietnamese balance of payments? So if it's credit, it's basically when you receive money, and with its debit, you're basically paying money. And insurance is basically a service, and it's not a good. So it has to fall under trade-in services. So A and D are not correct. And then for B and C, it's either credit or debit. So you're buying the insurance from the US, so you are basically debiting. So it has to be trade-in services and debit. So answer is C. Question 29, what is a restriction of the quantity of imports? So you're limiting the amount that you'll be able to import from another country. So this would be quota. A, it says dumping, which would basically be increasing the quantity of imports. C, it says subsidy. Subsidy would result in an increase in imports. And tariff is basically, it restricts the quantity by increasing the prices, but we are now directly restricting the quantity. So if you were to directly restrict the quantity, this would be quota. So I say it's B. Question 30, which combination of factors would attract a multinational company producing smartphones to operate in a low-income country? In a low-income other country, you have cheap labor. And so let's look at the ones that will be the best one. A, it says high economic growth rate and supply of cheap labor, which is correct. B, it says low corporation tax and competitive local market. If it's competitive local market, then it's not really correct because it's competitive, meaning that people can have many options. So it's not the best one for the multinational company. C says limited supply of skilled workers and cheap land, which is not correct. You would want skilled workers, but not in limited supply. And D says strict employment laws and high import duties, which is not correct. So the combination of factors that would attract a multinational company would be the high economic growth rate, the fact that there is an increase in AD, and the fact that labor is cheap makes it very compelling for multinational companies to actually produce smartphones in that low-income country. Because all the others, right, they have their caveats as well, including the competitive local market, limited supply of skilled workers, and strict employment laws, which would limit the companies to employing people, and the fact that there's high import duties, meaning that the resources will be very expensive. So best one will be A, high economic growth rate and supply of cheap labor. All right, that's the answer for question B. Okay, this is the end of this paper. I hope you find this video helpful. Do share this video out to other people who may need help with Cambridge O-Level. This is my first take on a Cambridge O-Level past year paper discussion. If you think I should make more videos like this, do comment down below. And stay tuned for the next video, which may probably be about A2 past year paper discussion. Oh, but that will take some time as I'm in the midst of preparing for that. Till then, this is qiphyedu.